Hi, this is Phoenix, and I'm going to talk about one of my favorite subjects ever, which is philosophy. The theme specifically that I'm going to be dealing with is what could be called loosely our place in the world, and trying to figure out what our place is in the world and what our purpose is, our telos, if we were going to use Aristotle's term, and the like. So, I want to start off with the basic question, which is what is our place in the world and why are we here? What is it that we're supposed to do? What is it that we're supposed um, to accomplish with our lives? And questions like that. I'm sure everybody asked this question at least at one point in their life. And it's definitely a question that I've been thinking about recently. So I thought that I would talk about it from a philosophical perspective. So, first off, I have a moral theory. And my moral theory is essentially that what we need to do as humans is to work hard to understand other people's subjective viewpoints. This is similar to my ideas of open minded subjectivism, which is where I say that we need to try to be as open to as many ideas as possible, or at least that's part of it. But this is more actually, it's different in the sense that I'm also tacking on the idea that we need to respect other people's subjectivity because when we respect other people's subjective viewpoints and the things that they understand and the things that they've learned and the things that they've experienced, we're essentially by so essentially respecting the subjectivity is symbolic for respecting that entire person and treating them with dignity and kindness as Immanuel Kant would imply. So that's basically my moral theory, something that you can turn around in your mind and see if it's suitable for you. But I would say that it's a really good way of approaching life and other people because everybody has a subjective viewpoint. Nobody can see the world 100% objectively. And I think that the more that we try to understand other people's experiences, the better off we can be. So, so what is the importance of subjectivity? Well, I'd like to illustrate the importance of subjectivity by actually using a modernist novel. The novel is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. If you're not familiar with the book, basically the book is structured in from four different perspectives. So the first part starts with the perspective of Benji Compson. The second part discusses is from the perspective of Quentin. The third part is from the perspective of Jason, and the fourth part is more of an objective perspective. But the whole point of it is it's kind of a cubist novel in a sense, where the various facets seem isolated, but they come together to form a interesting whole. And I think that we can look at the importance of respecting other people's subjectivity as um, similar to Faulkner's novel, where these different perspectives come together to create a cohesive whole. And so essentially, all of the people in your network of friends and family, um, and even enemies and people that you dislike, um, the more that you try to understand their subjective perspective, I think the more that a cohesive whole starts to form, just like Faulkner's novel. And it is simply an illustration, but I think it's a crucial illustration, and I think that it helps illustrate my point. So, so that's the importance of subjectivity, um, and there's definitely Nagel's idea. Thomas Nagel wrote a lot on the philosophy of mind, and he has this great idea in this essay that he wrote. And the basic question that he asks is, "What is it like to be a bat?" So the basic question that Thomas Nagel is asking is um, essentially that we can never know the subjective state of the bat. We can know we can know the physical and objective state, and specifically he uses the concept of echolocation. So we can know everything about echolocation, but because we're not literally the bat, we can never understand what it's like to be a bat. And that's the question that he asks, is what is it like to be a bat? Now, that has its own implications right there. The question of what's it like to be a bat, the idea that essentially the subjective is different from the objective. So we might know everything about know everything objectively about a person, for instance, but we can never understand what it's like to be them because we can never uh, enter their subjective states of being. But something that I get out of this that I think is crucial to my moral theory about respecting other people's subjectivity is definitely the idea of uniqueness and something special and something that makes a person special. And so you can boil this down to the question of what's it like to be a bat. Well, obviously it's something special to be a bat due to their subjective state of being, due to the fact that they experience echolocation in a way that we humans can never understand. And I think that that's super important for understanding this idea that I'm describing about how there is a uniqueness to each person, and by respecting that subjectivity, we can more easily respect them as individuals and respect them for their uniqueness and their individuality. Whether you want to extrapolate this further and describe this as the concept of the soul is another matter. That's something that I'm going to leave open to you, but I certainly wouldn't discount that as a possibility. I think that there is indeed something special that makes all of us human, no matter who we are. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and that's why I stress this idea of respecting other people's subjectivity. Now, um, and we can do that by thinking about what it's like to be a bat. Now, um, this approach, so I tend to align myself in at least certain aspects with the idea of libertarian free will. And libertarian free will is the idea that we must be fully responsible for our decisions and our actions, and essentially we must live very active lives. So we must be completely conscious of our choices, but also we must make every choice count and we must be proactive in our choices. And John Paul Sartre is a good example of a person who believed in libertarian free will. Now, this approach to respecting other people's subjectivity is definitely not incompatible with libertarian free will. And I think they actually go well together if we can understand the necessity of passivity and being passive. So in Taoism, there's the opposite idea of libertarian free will in many senses, which is the idea that we must be unassertive in our actions. And so we need to more readily observe things rather than just meddling with it. And so I think that if we synthesize these two ideas of passivity and action via Taoism and libertarian free will, or more broadly existentialism, what we get is an interesting synthesis of indeed passivity and action. And I think that by doing that, what we can come to realize is that sure, sometimes people need to act on us, but sometimes we need to act on them. And so respecting other people's subjectivity doesn't mean that we have to be completely unassertive, but it also doesn't mean that we should be so proactive and active towards them that we're violating their own free will and their own rights. We certainly don't want to overextend and over exaggerate our influence. So that's something to keep in mind, that indeed libertarian free will is not incompatible with this idea of respecting other people's subjectivity. So, what is our place in the world? Um, it is limited, I would say, but it is a necessary place. So, all of our roles are limited based off our subjectivity. So our subjectivity can never be objective naturally, which means that we can never know everything about the world. We can never know everything about another person, about society, about people, about why we're here. And so our role is very limited in a lot of ways because our brain can only pack in so much information, as Steven Pinker would imply, if I remember correctly. We can only no, actually, that was another essay I'd read. But regardless, the idea is there's only so much that our brains can understand, and so that makes our roles limited, but it also makes it necessary. So kind of the way that I like to look at every human in existence. Of course, there might be problems with this in some views, but I'm not worried about those right now. I kind of see it as what could be called an ecosystem structure of humanity. So each person serves a purpose. You could also look at it with the analogy of a chessboard. So each chess piece performs its own function and is necessary in their own way, ranging from the pawn to the queen to the king. And they're all necessary. And I kind of look at our roles in life, our place in this world, as kind of like that, where we're all necessary and we're all important, even if our role is limited. So we can only move, for instance, the the way of the rook, but that doesn't mean that we aren't contributing to the overall game in one way or another. And I think that that's super important to keep in mind. So the other thing that I wanted to say too is that essentially, in my understanding of life, and basically in my experience with talking to a lot of people and kind of a lot of the things that I've learned is that essentially our place in this world is unknown, or at least it's never fully known. So we can never fully know why we are here. There are some people that would say otherwise, so they have strong religious convictions that would imply for them that they do know what their purpose and conviction is, and I think that's great. For me personally, though, I tend to see my place as unknown in a lot of ways. Some things I think are known, so I think I'm here to be a writer. I think I'm here to try to influence people in the most positive way possible, but definitely not be coercive in any way. And I think it's to spread good ideas, or at least beneficial ideas. And I have a lot of those things that are known. But in a broader sense, there's a lot of things that I don't know. Sometimes I fall into an existential crisis because I'm not sure what my purpose is and what my place in the world is. And that can be very difficult. But even though in my situation at least it's unknown, I think for a lot of people it may be unknown. I think on the same token, it's something that can still be intuitively apprehended. So we may not be able to put into our words what our purpose is. We may not be able to put it into a nice, neat concept or theory or law of why we are here. But even though it's not hard and fast, we intuitively understand why we're here. And I think that even though it's a cliche, essentially we need to listen to our intuition, and especially as it is in relation to our purpose in this life. And so we must allow ourselves to fulfill our role in this complex drama that we live in. And we all have a place. I truly believe that we all have a place. Maybe that's too metaphysical of a viewpoint, but I truly believe that we all have a place and a purpose and a telos to complete, and we all have a certain meaning. And I think that that's very crucial to keep in mind. And so I'm going to fall back on a cliche, but I think it's an important cliche. And the cliche is that we need to follow our hearts because our hearts tell us things. And more specifically, what we need to do is we need to let our hearts reveal to us why we are here and what our place in this world is. I think that our heart tells us a lot of important things. And sure, it's not our literal heart, of course, that talks to us. It's our metaphorical heart, however you want to look at that. It could even just be shorthand for our intuition. But the point is, what we need to do is we need to listen to our heart because, and more specifically, as I said, allow our heart to reveal what our purpose is. And I say this because that's kind of been what I've had to do recently. Real quickly, kind of what I've had to learn is that my role is indeed limited in this world, but it doesn't mean that it's at odds with what my heart and my intuition is telling me. And even if I'm limited, that doesn't mean that I can't fulfill a role, and that doesn't mean I don't have a meaning to fulfill. And I think that that's what we have to keep in mind. I don't know where you're at in life. You may have a solid, secure understanding of what your role and purpose in this life is. Other people may not be so sure. And I think I'm definitely wanting to address those kind of people for sure that are unsure, because I think that it's important that we keep in mind that we do have a role and we do have a purpose. And the way that we can do that is by slowly letting the universe reveal its purpose to us and slowly letting our intuition and our heart reveal its purpose. And it can be very difficult and very frustrating at times. I've had to admit that there's a lot of limitations to what I can do, and that's been frustrating for me when I have such an ambitious vision of kind of what I want to see happen. But regardless, I think that it's important to remember that we do all have a purpose, and we're all here for a reason, and we need to slowly let it unfold and slowly let it make itself manifest. I hope you enjoyed this talk about our place in the world. And again, I would just say keep in mind that you do have a place in this world. I can never say that enough. If you ever feel that you don't have a place in this world, it's not true. We all have a place, we all have a purpose to fulfill, whether we're a pawn or a rook or a queen or a king. We all have a purpose, and we need to keep that in mind and let the universe slowly make that manifest to us and known to us. And of course, as much of a cliche as it is, we need to follow our hearts. Again, this is Phoenix, and thank you.